Welcome to the National History Day Insider Tips webinar series. My name is Vania Boland, and I'm the state coordinator for the National History Day in Iowa program. Today, we're going to discuss the performance category. A performance is a dramatic portrayal of your topic's significance in history and must be an original production. It should be scripted based on research of your chosen topic and should have dramatic appeal, but not at the expense of the historical information. The performance category is the only one that is presented live. Developing a strong narrative that allows your subject to unfold in a dramatic and visually interesting way is important. Memorizing, rehearsing, and refining your script is essential, so you should schedule time for this in your addition to your research, writing, costuming, and prop gathering. For the performance category, I have invited Dean Pope and his National History Day teacher, Deb Masker from Council Bluffs, Iowa, to share their inside tips on how to create a successful performance project. So I quickly just want to thank Dean and Deb for joining us today and sharing some tips. But before we start going into the rules, Dean and Deb, I would love to chat with you about your experience with History Day and with the performance category. So Dean, let's start with you. How many years have you participated in National History Day, and what level of contest have you competed at?
Well, this is my first year, and I made it through district, state, and nationals.
Fantastic. So why did you choose the performance category? And what would you share with other students who are thinking about this category? What are some things they should consider before doing a performance?
Well, I have some prior experience in theater. I've done shows in my local community theater, children's productions. I've done a lot in this field, you could say. So I had some prior experience, and I felt comfortable enough in my ability that I could portray this character accordingly. And when someone considers this, they should really consider how they're going to portray this character and if they feel like they can do it. I'm not saying no one can do it. I'm just saying a lot of people can get too nervous with it, and they may not feel comfortable doing it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dean, so much. And we're going to touch base on being that character and how you get into the performance and script and all that good stuff here in a couple slides. So Deb, I have some questions for you. First, let's start out. How many years have you participated in National History Day, and have you worked with any other National History Day programs?
Well, first of all, I began in 1990 with a performance of all things. That was the very first project. And the theme that year was science and technology and history. And I had 5 sixth grade students do a performance on the golden age of radio. Great topic for communication and history, not so much for science and technology from the way they approached it. We learned a lot about what not to do that first year. And so I've been participating ever since, depending on which school I'm at. I've done it in Nebraska. I've been involved in Iowa for, I would say, almost 32 years now. And I've learned a lot by making a lot of mistakes and learning how to grow as a teacher, I guess, or grow as a coach, I guess, where I need to step in, where I need to step back and let the kids have control over their projects. I have gone to Philadelphia with the National History Day project on a teacher's workshop, probably 15 years ago. And last summer I took the historical argument writing workshop with National History Day. So those are some of the other things that I have done with National History Day.
Fantastic. So in connection with the performance category, what would you share with other teachers on how they can help prepare their students for their category?
Well, I have a calendar that we follow, which I know we're going to talk about later. We spend the whole first month of September really drilling the theme, and I know they get tired of it, but I want them, when we get to the end of September, that they really have picked a topic that really will match the theme. We talk about, is it historically old enough to be a project? We have good discussions about that. We look at possibly doing Iowa topics whenever we can. I think those are important to look at local history, see if there's are things there that we might be able to do to research. And so I follow a calendar. We take a trip to the State Historical Library in October on a day off of school. So the kids have that experience. November, we take a trip to Iowa State and do research in Ames. Obviously, those didn't happen last year, but they will happen this year.
Mm-hmm.
We meet at our local library to flesh out resources that are there. We contact individuals for interviews. I have found museums especially helpful for my students to be able to talk to a museum expert or maybe even an individual as a primary source. Dean got to talk to Jeff Urban at the Roosevelt Presidential Library. He was just, I can't even tell you how much help he was as we were trying to design this project.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are things that we do. December is spent writing thesis statements, and then we launch into project preparation all the time, working on resources and getting things into their bibliographies so that we're not, madly trying to finish at the end. So I guess my biggest advice for teachers is to calendar yourself. What are you going to accomplish each month? What are you going to have the kids be ready to do so that when you get to January and you're starting to put those projects together, that you have the bulk of the research done, the bulk of the work done, so you can start working on the project area.
Outstanding. Thank you, Deb. That is great advice. The calendar is definitely a beautiful idea. All right, so before you start working on a performance, we want you to ask the following questions. So first, should I work in a group or as an individual? Is creating a performance the best way to showcase my topic? Meaning, can my research be presented in the form of a play? Does my topic have main characters, and how would they interact with each other? Can I develop a script and include historical evidence from my research? Do I feel comfortable memorizing my script and presenting my research in front of a crowd? So Dean, I have a couple questions for you. Before you got started, well, first let me back up here. What is the process for starting a new History Day project, or what is your specific process? So are you digging through a bunch of different topics and trying to pair up which category works best? And how did you know that the performance category was the best fit for you? I know you said you had theater experience, but how did you know that this topic was going to work well as a performance?
Well, originally I came into this with like no idea, no experience at all. And I just started trying to think of some topics that might work. And right away, when we were talking about different presentation styles, and when it was brought up as like a performance, I immediately jumped on it and said, I want to do this. And mainly because of my theater experience, but also because I do just love performing, and I knew I could find a topic that really fit with this, especially with communication and history as the main thing. And I eventually got to FDR by just kind of researching different things about American history, revolving around like communication, mainly thinking politics. A funny story is we actually had I think our first meeting over at Google Meet, and my profile picture was of Theodore Roosevelt. And so Ms. Masker immediately suggested FDR as a topic because of Theodore Roosevelt.
Well, absolutely. So now that you have some experience under your belt with History Day, now you're kind of coming back into your second year here. What would you share with other students? What's the biggest piece of advice that you can say to other students that when you start your History Day project, here's the first thing you should start doing?
Research right away. After you know your topic and your presentation style, research immediately. And you can be flexible with with your schedule, how much you want to research at a time, but do not procrastinate, because I had a slight issue with that, mainly because I was confused in some areas of it, but by the end I got there. But yeah, just don't procrastinate, and the research is the most important thing.
That's great. So Deb, to reach out to you, how do you help get your students started at the beginning of the year? And I know you mentioned calendars and you just kind of brushed up on a lot of it, but let's focus it on the performance category. Is there anything right at the beginning of the year that you want them to start focusing on? Like, do you have them write out pieces of the script, or how do you get them started?
Well, the first thing is I do a 4-square activity with the kids, and they put general areas of history they're interested in, and then we hone down to what they think that they're interested in and how does it match the theme. And I don't know how many times I said to the kids, tell me how this matches communication in history. No, convince me that this matches communication in history. Because if it doesn't match the theme, you shouldn't proceed. The kids have research documents that I provide for them that are blank for newspapers or journal articles or whatever, so they can get the citation information down. And then they take notes on those documents, and I'm willing to share with anybody. There's nothing special about them. But the kids really like those, and it helps them organize their research. And then once they have decided that, yes, I want to do a performance, and yes, is this my topic, then we start creating an outline, kind of a broad brush strokes of what we want to cover. And then we start, after the research is done, as Dean said, then we start putting a script idea together. Dean and I discussed how many of the fireside chats to use, which ones were the most important, which ones did we think had the greatest impact on the American public. And you don't know how much we cut out of the script to keep it under 10 minutes. We spent a lot of time, Dean would write and then I would review. We also had a wonderful paraprofessional librarian in our building at the time, and she is a great proofreader and would also read the script and provide feedback to Dean as well. So that script went through multiple versions before we finally settled on the one that went to state.
Incredible. And you just mentioned one when you're talking about librarians. Do you have any suggestions for other History Day teachers on maybe some networking in the building or other teachers that could help students review materials? Are there different resources outside of the school, such as different university libraries or state historical societies that you work with?
Well, as I said earlier, I have always found that if you make a phone call and you explain the purpose of your students' work, that 99% of the time people are more than willing to help you. Now, when my kids get to the high school level, they make the inquiries and I'm there for support. I will tell you a little secret, Dean, you can close your ears. I usually make a phone call ahead of time and set it up so that when the student calls to request information, at least somebody there knows what they're talking about. But we have had great luck at the State Historical Library in Des Moines. I know there's one in Iowa City, but we only get as far as Des Moines, and the people there have been a huge support to us when I bring the kids for our research day. So, you know, ask the question. Don't be afraid to make the phone call, because as the kids will tell you, I do my little history day dance around the room when we are able to make those connections with people. And it just makes the history come to life for them, to do that interview, to prepare those questions, you know, being able to use Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it is that we have today. I didn't have that. My kids didn't have that when we started back in 1990. And so just being able to make those long distance connections is amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is great advice. All right, so let's go into the performance production. So first step, preparing a script. So we're brainstorming with general ideas on how your topic characters might be presented. So you want to make sure your script contains references to the historical evidence found in your research. Using actual dialogue, quotations, or brief excerpts from speeches are a good way to put historical detail into your performance. Remember that your script should center on the thesis statements, supporting statements, and the conclusion that you developed from your research. Then we're preparing a set. Think about the different types of sets that might help depict your topic. Is there a prop that is central to your story? Prepare the costuming. Good costumes help make a performer convincing, but make sure they are appropriate to the topic. You do not need to purchase or make an elaborate costume. Sometimes the simple works best. So for example, a white shirt, dark pants, skirt can fit into almost any time period. So Dean, I want to start with you first. What are your thoughts on costumes and props? Are they needed to make a good project? Is less more? What are your thoughts on the props and building those props or building a background set for a performance?
Well, Ms. Masker had some really good advice. She told to all the people doing performances in our group, she said, keep it simple, which is really true. Like for me, you may think my costume with like the suit and stuff was kind of elaborate. But for doing one character and well, two with the narrator, but they both can be portrayed in very subtle ways by just like a demeanor change, a slight change. Like I used the glasses a lot to signify I was changing from FDR to narrator or narrator to FDR. And prop-wise, I really did not have many. I mean, like I said, I had the glasses and I had maybe like a microphone to signify like the fireside chats. But we need small things to signify different changes in maybe time, a scene, characters, anything. And when thinking about like a set, again, if you can just have a blank background that just maybe has, like I had a presidential seal and like an American flag, very general things that just signify a presidential office.
That's great information. So an additional question I have for you is how did you know when you were starting to put together your script and make your plan, how did you select the characters that you were going to use? So you mentioned a narrator. How did you know that you needed a narrator, or did you know that you needed a narrator focused on your thesis statement? Obviously your project was on President Theodore Roosevelt, so you knew that you had to have him in there. But maybe it's something as you research, but how did you know what specific characters you were going to have in your story?
Well, there's only so much you can do as a character by just. So I used for different scenes as FDR. I had talking to basically invisible people, having one-side conversations with actual members of his cabinet. So I had like his Secretary of the Press, of the Interior, of the Treasury, people like those, and I would use them for FDR to basically talk to, so that he could then convey information to the audience, but at the same time get to the point of saying, I'll use a fireside chat to convey this to the public, stuff like that. And when thinking of like the narrator, there's always so much information you can convey by having one-side conversations. And I've seen this a lot with like even real plays and stuff, of using a narrator to talk directly to the audience so that you can convey information about the scene change, about the time, about the aftermath of his fireside chats, things like that would not work well with FDR. I switched to the narrator so that they would work well, and vice versa.
That's impressive. I like that. That's a good tip. Thank you, Dean. And Deb, how can teachers support their students as they're developing this performance? So I'm assuming you read through the script with Dean side by side many, many, many times, but do you have any advice for other teachers who are maybe brand new to this category as they're building the script, as they're putting together props, background, etc.? What advice do you have for other teachers?
Well, Dean is right. I told him to keep it simple. I said, you have to be able to manage this set. If we would have been in person, Dean by himself would have had to, set the setup and everything. So we talked a lot about keeping it simple. We talked a lot about costume and keeping it simple, so that what he was wearing could portray different people. Originally, he took the jacket off to be the narrator and then put the jacket on when he was FDR, and it was taking way too much time. So we just let the jacket on and let the glasses be the way to switch the character. So those are things you've got to time and work with. A performance takes a lot of practice, and I would listen to the kids. I had a group performance and an individual performance, and the girls would go through theirs, and I would make comments and suggestions, and they would go off and practice, and then Dean would do his for me, and then we would make comments, and we time. You know, we always had that watch or the phone in front of us getting the time. Make sure that we did not go over the 10 minutes. And actually for districts, we went over. It wasn't a lot over, but it was over. So we had to come back to the drawing board, cut some more out. I kept saying what is nice to need to know versus nice to know. I think Dean got tired of hearing that from me. But it just, the performance category takes a lot of practice. I have one young lady who portrayed Governor Ray 2 years ago, and she has a very conversational style of presenting, and she would always have a basic outline in her head of major topics that she wanted to cover, but she did not follow a verbatim script. And that drove me crazy as a teacher, but she had enough sense and she was enough of a performer that she could handle that style of presentation. Dean is very much of a memorizing person, but able to, you know, if he left out a line, no big deal. The only people that would know it was him and me. You know, so he could, you know, I don't want to say recover, but he had enough sense of the script that if he made a little change in the script, it wasn't that big of a deal to the story that he was trying to tell. But I would tell teachers, you've got to have time to practice. The kids have to be committed to practicing. One of the reasons Dean did an individual performance was because he wanted to rely on himself. And he knew his schedule outside of school, and he knew that an individual performance was the best. My girls that did the group performance, they loved to work together. And they did a lot of practicing via the computer because of COVID. And they did a great job as well. But the three of them just felt like the group performance was the best way to go.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much. So let's move into time requirements. So performances may not exceed 10 minutes in length. Timing starts at the beginning of the performance following the announcement of the title and the students' names. You will be allowed 5 minutes to set up and 5 minutes to remove any props needed for your performance. So I know last year during COVID-19, this was a little different since we did it virtually and it was recorded. But Dean, we touched on this a little bit. I know you guys did a lot of timing, but my question for you is, how did you ensure your performance was under 10 minutes? Did you come into any situations where you really had to focus on that, you know, needed information versus this might just be a fun fact? Can you give me an example of one of those that you had to remove?
Well, we removed, like, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. One thing we removed a lot of were the actual fireside chats. Like we kept with we kept with 3 of them, but we removed like entire sections of them just to meet the time requirements. And Masker touched upon this about like the jacket. And that was one thing that we ran into trouble with, because I would have to take the jacket up, and it was kind of like, we had to make sure it was a jacket that looked like the time period. So it was like a really weird button jacket. So I had to get it onto the coat rack and then go switch to the narrator, which just took too much time and was not really necessary. So we just switched to like the glasses and a very subtle but standoutish demeanor change, you could say. And one thing I really had to work on was dictation. Like I like a really minor impediment that I fixed over a few years. So like I had to really focus on like dictation and speaking quickly, but balancing that with clearly.
Nope, that's great. You did a successful job. Did a great job. So media devices, use of slides, MP3 players, computers, or other media within your performance is permitted. You must provide and run all equipment and carry out any special lighting or sound effects. So only those students listed as participants may participate in the production. So they are the only ones that can utilize those media devices within the performance. And Dean, I'm not sure, I can't remember, did you use any media devices in your performance or just in your general, personal opinion? Do you think media devices are needed in a performance?
Well, we had thought about playing, I think it was Buck Rogers, because that was a very popular radio thing at the time. We thought it was like a historical context, but we kind of thought about the character itself is the historical context. Like the character and like the person chats and what FDR was speaking about with these one-sided conversations. That was all like the historical context. That was like everything. So we ended up just having our radio there, just kind of signifying and pointing towards the radio being a big part of the time. And I do think if used correctly, that those kind of things of media devices can be very helpful. I did not need them, but things that say would that talk about like a TV show maybe. One of the ideas we had thought about for this contest was like something along the lines of like Mr. Rogers. And so if someone had done something like that, they could have had like his music or something along those lines. So things like that, but not every time is it necessary.
So I hear what you're saying is if it serves a purpose within your performance, then that's good. But if it's just a fun add-on, it's probably not needed. Okay, that's great advice, Dean. Thank you. All right, so let's get into the required written materials. So the process paper, this is required for every category. And it is in the process paper, the student will talk about how your topic is related to the National History Day theme. You have to explain that. You also need to explain your historical argument. And you need to explain why you chose the performance category and how you created your project, how you went about creating it. And the beautiful annotated bibliography that is also associated with every single National History Day project. So the annotated bibliography is a list of sources that contributed to your research, and it's organized by primary and secondary sources. It includes sources of visual, audio material, and oral interviews. You can also bundle photos or other materials from the same collection in a single citation in the annotated bibliography, and annotations must explain how you use the source. So Dean, a couple questions for you. First, what is your advice to other National History Day students who are working on a process paper or annotated bibliography for the first time? What are some ways they can be successful and try not to stress over these two items?
Well, in regards to the process paper, that is a much simpler thing to do than the bibliography, because the process paper itself can be done over the course of your work, because it can't all be done at one time, because you must actually reflect upon what you've done. So Ms. Masker provided us with these, I guess you could say, outlines for a process paper that could be tailored to your own project, which was very helpful. And anyone could do the same thing, really. Just know what each paragraph you want to be about, and then fill it in as you go along. Like say you have a paragraph about your research. Once you have enough resources in, you could reflect upon that and discuss how that was difficult for you or how it was easy for you. Things like that. The bibliography, on the other hand, that is something that I struggled with because I procrastinated a little with it, and that's another thing people need to be sure of, to just get it done as soon as possible. But it is a very helpful tool, and it can really improve your work by having that and being able to show all your resources and how they help you.
That's great. Well, thank you for being honest. I'm sure you're not the only student who procrastinated on that. That is a popular thing in History Day to do. I completely understand. Questions for Deb. How can teachers prepare their students for creating a process paper and an annotated bibliography? I know Dean just mentioned to us some of the tools you shared with students to help prepare them, but do you have any additional advice for teachers?
Well, we save the process paper for our work in January and February. I don't even talk about it with the kids until then, mainly because they're so, I don't want to use the word overwhelmed, but there's so much that they're doing research-wise that I try to We just don't even talk about it until January and February. And by the time we get that far, they think this is an easier piece to write. A couple of the rule changes and things, the focus, I always thought we always focused on the historical argument, but I think that is becoming an even more important piece as far as the project goes and the process paper. So those are things that really need to be written well, and you need to be able to explain how you think your project matches or goes with the theme through the historical argument. I have the kids use EasyBib as a way to store their information on their bibliography. And so we start that right away. And as I said, I have pages that the kids take notes on, and they have a notebook that they put them in, or however they want to keep them together. But we try to make sure that we have quality primary sources and then quality secondary sources. And I always tell them that they should have a balance of resources in their bibliography. It should not all be websites. You need to make sure that you have access to journal articles, whether it's JSTOR or whatever, newspaper articles whenever possible, whether it's Chronicling America or I had a student do a local history project, and we were able to use the Council Bluffs Nonpareil for a lot of resources. And so I push them to try to have something, a few resources in each area, whether it's a website, a printed material like a book, a journal article, so that they have a balance of materials, so they understand how each one of those is important in their bibliography. I will tell you that limiting the annotations to 2 to 3 sentences is extremely difficult. And we really had to work on getting the essential into those 2 to 3 sentences. And that, you know, that's a new rule change. And I just found that to be a challenge.
Thank you for sharing that advice. I think that will definitely help prepare teachers for this upcoming contest season. Before we end here today, I just want to share a couple additional assistant pieces. So on the National History Day and Iowa Getting Started website, we have 3 opportunities here. There are additional insider tips webinars that have already been pre-recorded in different categories, and other videos that can help you for researching at home, building your analysis and your thesis statement. So make sure to check out those videos. You can also ask a librarian. So if you're needing help looking for other resources on your topic, you can submit a request and we will alert a librarian at the State Historical Society of Iowa. We also have a mentorship program. So if you're wanting additional assistance and want someone to actually review your project, we have a list of National History Day alumni who are more than happy to review your project materials and give you feedback before a district contest. So make sure to check out those opportunities on the National History Day and Iowa Getting Started webpage. And Dean and Deb, before we end here today, I just want to ask one more time if you have any additional tips or advice for other students and teachers. So Dean, if you could go back and share a piece of advice with yourself as your first year in History Day, what would it be?
I think again, it's don't procrastinate. That's still a big thing that I feel like should just be welded into people's brains before they start. But something I would share with, maybe not myself, but with other people, is have confidence in yourself, because I've seen this a lot, like in people presenting in things like this, such as like plays and stuff, of people having these little habits and stuff that can really distract from your topic, because your demeanor is very important in this kind of thing. Because with having a strong demeanor and a strong just like presence can really bolster your presentation tenfold. But then having just such a very meek and no confidence in yourself while you're presenting can really just bring it to the ground, just kill your project before you even get past the district.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And you mentioned demeanor. When you were researching about Theodore Roosevelt, did you try to look up any clips or look at photos? How did you kind of develop that ego when you were performing?
Well, I feel like I looked at a lot of photos. I watched a lot of videos. I listened to as far as I chats, obviously,
Mhm.
like the whole project. But everything I read just talked about how much of a strong presence and just like how much of a family member presence he was to people. Like people never considered him a president when he was on the radio. They always thought of him as someone they could trust and feel safe taking advice from.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's beautiful tips. Thank you, Dean. Deb, do you have any final advice for teachers, maybe teachers who are just starting in the History Day program?
My suggestion would be to try to find someone that is in your area that you can ask questions of. A couple of years ago, I was blessed to be able to help the kids in Harlan get started on their projects, and we did some Google Meets and things, and they that school has continued to participate. So find that person that you can bounce ideas off of, talk to them. I have a teacher here in the city of Council Bluffs that also does History Day, and we often share ideas or ask questions of each other, and I think that that is extremely helpful. But one of the things that I would say to any teacher that's involved, and I think any teacher that's ever done History Day will tell you this, have fun. The kids love my History Day dance, the goofy things that we do. It's so important to have fun. And that kind of helps lessen the stress a little bit. And I don't mean silly fun, but find ways to enjoy each other's company, find ways to support each other while the kids are performing. When Dean was going to nationals, one of the girls whose project didn't advance came to me and she goes, "What can we do to help Dean? What can we do to make sure that he's going to have the best performance possible?" And so they get to that point where they really rely on each other and look forward to coming to History Day on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. Nobody ever griped about coming in on a Saturday or getting some extra help via Google Meet or whatever we needed to do. So just have fun and let the kids enjoy the research and find out the really cool, weird, unique things that they find out as they go along. They may not use it in their project, but it's kind of fun to find out those things. So my advice, connect with somebody in your area that's done it before or is a new teacher like you are, and go through it together and have fun.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And if you have any additional questions about the performance category or any other category or History Day subject, please feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. And I just want to say thank you so much to Dean Pope and Deb Masker for joining us today and talking about the performance category. We really appreciate all your advice and tips. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.